we could talk about it. Could someone just give a brief look at the calendar and see? Otherwise, we'll continue with what we left off, but I don't know what that is. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Satarine. My favorite mantra, because if we get Prabhupada's mercy, everything is good. Even a fool can cross over the ocean of material existence. Madhvacharya Ramachandra Vijayotsava. When is that? 2 weeks? Madhvacharya. Hold on a second. It's Madhvacharya, not Madhava. Would you like to hear something about Madhvacharya? Since we've never heard. Anyway, it would be, we'll read a little bit and then we'll discuss. Let's see how it goes. I have some document here. I'm just going through it. Trying to see who wrote this. Sounds like it was written by Tamal Krishna Maharaj, but that doesn't make sense. I've never seen this before. The preface is by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. It doesn't say who wrote this. That's kind of dangerous to not know who wrote something you're reading. Because you want to make sure what you're reading is bona fide. A lot of introductory material here. Well, this chapter is called Intro, and I think the intro is philosophical. So give me a moment to go to chapter 1. See what we find. Sorry for being unprepared. I'm working on the next workshop. And all my time is going into that. You're lucky I'm even here. I barely made it. Hold on. So. Oh, there's a lot of introductory material here. Sounds like this is a quite elaborate description of his life. Okay, here's Madhva's philosophy. That seems relevant. Hmm. Madhvacharya's original name was Anandatirtha. And as the great incarnation of one of Lord Vishnu's greatest preachers, Vayudev, Madhva, Vayudev, the demigod Vayu, accepted direct instruction from his Lord Vyasadeva. In the Agni Puranas mention how Vayu seen sitting on the back of a deer holding a flag. Madhva was also quite often seated on a deer skin holding a flag. Well, one thing we understand that generally these great acharyas are not ordinary people, although, well, when they become great, they're never ordinary, but most of them were never at any time ordinary. And so we will see their birth and their childhood activity is quite special, unusual. So in the Vana Parva of Mahabharata, it is stated Vayu is the messenger of the demigods, and in another place, Vayu resides in the palace of Brahma. So he's the messenger of the gods, and Madhva is the reestablisher as Krishna says, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, the knowledge of the Gita was lost. Madhva is reestablishing it. You could say all acharyas are reestablishing it, or either maintaining or reestablishing. So this is what it is written here. As we have said, though the line did in some shape or form come down, it was not truly effective until Madhva began preaching. On his preaching activities, writing books, touring all of Bharata Bhumi, he carried a new strength that was not there before. So acharyas sometimes are compared to, you have a power line. I'm not an electrician, but this is how I understand it. You have a power line and the line is going for long distances, and periodically on the power line, there'll be something that generates electricity because the line can't carry electricity indefinitely and it has to re-energize it for, I don't know the technical term, but anyway, you understand the idea that at a certain point that power is going to diminish unless there is something to regenerate it. And so these great acharyas, specifically the great acharyas, are ones who didn't just come along and keep the flow going, but the flow was going down, and or either the flow was going down and they picked it up back to normal, or the flow was normal and they picked it up and they took it higher. And an example is given, or a comparison is given to the world of science. There are many great scientists, but if you study science, you only study a few, because you will study the scientists that made the greatest contribution, right? So you have people like Newton and Einstein and others. And, there's thousands of scientists, but the ones who made a great contribution, that you'll study those. So the great acharyas are like that. You say, well, why is it that in the disciplic succession, you only see 35? There were so many gurus, but these were the main gurus, the main contribution. So in modern times, in our times, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, huge contribution in reviving Krishna consciousness, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. Huge contribution, Srila Prabhupada, huge contribution. Anyone who makes a huge contribution will stand out in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Now, I will pose a question to you for which it's more of a question to just not answer, because I don't know that we can properly answer it. But within the institution of ISKCON, what if a great Acharya appeared? That would tend to beg the question, is this the new Acharya? And now does ISKCON follow the line that this Acharya gives, or do we remain chaste to Srila Prabhupada? I mean, we do have the answer, but I said, I feel like there will be some disagreement, but most people agree. Now, that Prabhupada is the Acharya, and any great Acharya that comes will represent Prabhupada. They wouldn't try to replace him. They would try to, as any great devotee is trying to do, is to clarify. Sometimes we can misunderstand Prabhupada. So the Guru, the Acharya, their job is to represent the Guru and clarify what they mean. What is interesting about this, I don't know if you're aware of this, but oftentimes the Acharyas will write a book, and then they'll not write another book, which is commentary on the book they just wrote. That one could say, well, why didn't you just write them both together, or why did you need to comment? But misunderstanding is possible. We could say that they wanted to get the points made, and then they wanted to write another book to make sure that there was no speculation or misrepresentation or misunderstanding of those points. Sometimes, it makes more sense that a disciple would do that, but sometimes the person who wrote the book does it with his own book to ensure there's no misunderstanding. And we can definitely see misunderstanding is quite normal in Kali Yuga when people lack sufficient intelligence and qualification to understand spiritual knowledge. I was thinking of giving a talk, and the title of the talk would be misleading, but it would be something like "Not Intelligent Enough to Deviate," if you know what I mean. So sometimes the innocence and submissiveness, and I don't want to say ignorance, but for the sake of this discussion, I will say, we'll just say simplicity is a great quality, because the chastity of the disciple to a guru is oftentimes easier when the disciple is not so intelligent enough to misunderstand, if you know what I mean. So, you look at ISKCON in the early days, and you wonder how people who were so young in bhakti could maintain the siddhanta and the mission and the mood. A lot of the reason is that they didn't know how not to do that. They weren't smart enough. But then as we progressed, we became smart enough to deviate, if you know what I mean. I know more than my guru, or I'm interpreting and, judging and evaluating in a way that I may come to conclusions that were against the conclusions that my guru came to, thinking that I'm adding or improving in some way. So not that you can't add or improve, I don't want to say that, but sometimes you add and improve, but it's not an addition. It's an addition, but not an improvement. It's a subtraction or deviation. So, there's a lot to be said of how, if you wanted to analyze how Prabhupada could have been successful with such young devotees, then one thing you would conclude was they were just doing what they were told to do. And so, in a sense, if I'm doing what I'm told to do and I'm fairly ignorant, but I execute the order, then I'll be more effective than being very intelligent and interpreting that order in a way that I don't exactly execute it the way Prabhupada intended. So it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not telling everybody it's good to be stupid and in ignorance, but it's good to be humble enough to know that you could be so intelligent that you mess things up, so to speak. And that's always a problem. And we definitely see that problem much more now than when Prabhupada was here, because there was no room for that. Well, Prabhupada would catch you. If you did that, you'd be caught with your pants down, so to speak. So it never went anywhere. Prabhupada caught it all. But after Prabhupada left, then there's debate, and some people deviate in the name of, this is the new Siddhanta. This is what Prabhupada really meant. And come up with ideas that we couldn't imagine would exist during Prabhupada's time. So that's the reality of disciplic succession. So that's why it's so important to understand Prabhupada. And of course, the challenge we have is that we have the books of other acharyas, and sometimes it may appear that what other acharyas are saying is different. And it's not different, it's just we don't understand. It may appear very different, but there are two ways to understand it. One is I understand that I don't understand that there isn't a difference, or there is a difference, but I don't know how to adjust those differences into some harmonious whole, that differences can exist. But ultimately, we have to, of course, follow the line of what Prabhupada gave us. Otherwise, we risk being over-intelligent. So, it's a subtle thing. I think it's better to start with the premise that whatever the acharyas are teaching and whatever Prabhupada is teaching is the same. If I don't see it as the same, it's my defect. If I come to understand there are differences for whatever reason, then I don't see them as contradictory. I see them as unified in a broader sense. Maybe I don't understand the unity in that they can be different. There's room for differences. But I fall on the line of Srila Prabhupada. That's the safest position. Now, one thing we have to deal with, and when am I going to do this? I think on October 21st or something. We're doing a recording for the Spanish channel. There's Mayapur TV has a Spanish channel, and we're going to discuss this topic. But there is the other side of this equation in which something is not going well and it needs to be adjusted. And we say, no, I'm not going to adjust it because it's not the way Prabhupada did it. And then you have to confront the reality that if the result is not good, Prabhupada, when you meet him, will say, why didn't you change that? So I'm just throwing that out to you in your life. Most of you are going to live longer than I am. And so you will see changes that I don't see. And if you see changes, you have to call them out. And if you see things that aren't changing, that are creating undesirable results, you got to call that out also. So that's the challenge. And that is not easy, to know what should be changed and what shouldn't be changed. It requires intelligence, but I just want to drop that. I just want to put that seed in your mind that as a follower of Prabhupada, this is something that you should be learning to do. In your education of Krishna consciousness, you can keep that in mind, that one of the contributions I will need to make to the true devotees and to the movement and to myself is to understand which things are unchangeable, and which things are not, which things could be adjusted, and when and what should be adjusted and what shouldn't be. Because if we adjust what shouldn't be, it's trouble. And if we don't adjust what should be, it could create trouble. Not that it necessarily would, but it could. Correct? This is a difficult job. Even advanced devotees will have difficulty sometimes. And added to this, we have another added problem. I was preparing this course on how to choose a partner, how to choose the right, not how to choose a partner, how to choose the right one, and how to know who would be the right partner or the wrong partner for you. And so I already kind of understood a lot. And then I began to do more research and more research. And the more research I did, the more information I got and the more subtleties were there. And it's kind of coming to the point where I don't even know if there's any end to the information, because there's unlimited ways it seems you can make a mistake in evaluating a partner. It also seems that there's a lot of people who are not really qualified for anybody, to be anybody's partner, which can include ourselves as well. So it's not just how to choose a partner, it's also how to be qualified to be one, because you can get the perfect one and mess it up. But anyway, as I was doing this work, I was reminded that, or at least the thought process that was going through my mind is I was thinking, I wonder, was it this difficult in other ages, like for people to get along? And of course, my answer was, no, this is Kali Yuga. It's called the Age of Quarrel. So now you have 1,000,001 books about relationships. Probably in the last ages, there weren't any books about relationships, like, or at least in Sat Yuga. There were no relationship books. No one had a problem. You could say, well, they all lived alone in the forest. No, I don't think it. Maybe they did, but you know where I'm going. This is Kali Yuga, and it's called the Age of Quarrel. So become a relationship coach. You'll have 8,630,000 potential clients. Right, every living entity in Kali Yuga is potential client if you're a relationship coach. So that's why it's so difficult. And as we try to understand what Prabhupada wanted and pontificate and try to make adjustments where needed, obviously people will disagree. And, we need to be humble enough to know when we're making mistakes and learn from our seniors. At the same time, disagreement is normal. Not everyone will agree with us. I told you this story before. It was very, very interesting. I don't know if we could do it now, and I don't know if we'd want to do it now, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote an article. And it was an article that was published, I believe, in his magazine, The Harmonist. And it was about the problems within the temples in the Gaudiya Math and not keeping the standards. So it was quite a critical article and heavy, as I understand. These things are going on, they shouldn't be going on. And he penned it with a fictitious name. Is there a name for that when you're an author and you use someone else's name? I think there's a name for that. I can't remember. Other than fictitious name. Pseudonym. In English, there's a word called pseudonym. Sometimes female writers used male names because females were not appreciated. Or people wouldn't read books written by females. So people were really upset about the article. So who is this devotee that has the audacity to write this article? So even the instructions of their guru they were arguing with. Isn't that interesting? Like sometimes someone will say something and be challenged, and they don't, and the devotees who challenge them don't realize that, I was just quoting Prabhupada. It wasn't me. So that's the nature of Kali Yuga. It's just like there's a Prabhupada say provocation. Over any little thing, they'll be fighting and provocation, as you've noticed. In some countries, it's a little more common than others. Some countries it happens 500 times a second. Other countries is only 200 times a second. But it happens often, right? I won't mention the names of the countries. And there may be reasons why we fight, and you could analyze them, but the ultimate reason is that's the environment of Kali Yuga. It's just a reality. Anyway, Hare Krishna. We'll go back to reading. I just thought that was relevant to the topic. So Madhvacharya is a disciple of Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva is apparently, we are told, still residing in the Himalayas. One devotee went to the place where Vyasadeva is residing. Of course, it is said he's residing there, but not in a form that's visible to our senses. So the devotee went there with a recently printed edition. This is like when Prabhupada was alive, with a Bhagavad Gita, and presented the Bhagavad Gita to Vyasadeva, and he told Prabhupada, I presented your Bhagavad Gita to Vyasadeva. Prabhupada was a little taken aback. You presented it to Vyasadeva, yeah. Well, he went to that place. In this Guru Parampara, the main emphasis is always on Siksha, or transcendental instructions, that the great Vaishnava devotees of the Lord impart to their Sisyas. So I read something interesting in my preparation of this course. This is so interesting. And Anuradha, you're going to be very happy to hear this. And I will explain my Anuradha. We'll be happy to hear this in a minute. This is so interesting. If you're not married, pay attention. The more elaborate your wedding, the more you spend on it, statistically speaking, the more likely you are to become divorced. Wow. Isn't that interesting? Hari Bhakti is happy to hear that. So, you don't have to spend much on your daughter's wedding, because you tell your wife, more we spend, the more chance of divorce there is. Anuradha's wedding was arranged in 5 days. I don't think it cost more than, I don't know, $300-400, and she probably got that given to her by somebody. So Anuradha's, definitely not it's going to have a very successful marriage based on these statistics. Does that make you happy, Anuradha? Yeah. It wasn't a simple wedding, but compared to a wedding in India, which goes on for days and days and days, and then goes on for a few more days, and spends hundreds of thousands of lakhs of rupees, and then spends hundreds of thousands more, and hundreds. Then it gets into hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're like a what are the rich people? I forget their name. It's a couple races of very traditionally wealthy family, right, in India. What's that group? What are they called? I forget. My brain is not. Certain group of Indians that are very wealthy. And anyway, I was talking to one of them about their weddings, and they said, if you go to a wedding, and you're not wearing like designer label, or you don't have the designer label purse and this and that, and you don't have like $4 million worth of gold on you, people won't even talk to you. You don't exist. It's like that. What's that group, Hari Bhakti? What's that group of wealthy Indians? Like super wealthy. I can't remember the name of them. Anyway, some Sikhs are quite wealthy, but these are not Sikhs. Mararis, and there's another one. Mararis, and there's another group. You know them. Mararis are like the Jews of India, right? Bania? No, there's another group. I can't remember. Anyway, Anyway, but
Malwadis.
no worries. What else? There's another one. No. Anyway, it's a prestige thing. So, but so when I read that, I thought, oh, this is really interesting, because this Gujaratis, they just open hotels in America. That's like fake businessmen, not the real thing. Unless they own like 100 hotels, then yeah. Gujaratis, yeah, they're good at business, but these other ones are like, we're talking like core party. Anyway, that's no, maybe it is Maoris. I thought there was one other one. So of course now everything's changing because all you have to do is go to university and get a job at Google, and your wife get a job at Google, and you'll be richer than the Gujaratis, right? Or you can compete with them, especially if it's Google in, Silicon Valley. And you got a high paid job, and between you and your wife are making $500,000 US a year, yeah. And you're just a Shudra working for somebody else. So that's possible today. Until AI, takes over your job. That's another thing. Anyway, so when I read this, I was thinking, oh, this is very interesting, because kind of the culture in ISKCON is, the initiation. You get initiation, do a nice sacrifice, invite your friends, and it's a big, as we say in English, hullabaloo. You know that word? Have you ever heard that word? Hullabaloo. A big deal. Corpri, you ever heard that word? Hullabaloo. I don't know the Spanish for hullabaloo. Hullabaloo is like you make a big deal about something. It's called a hullabaloo. I don't know where it comes from. So you make this big hullabaloo about it. But if, for example, you know anything about marriage, you know that the ceremony has very little to do with the success of the marriage, right? Or the success of the marriage depends on so many things other than the ceremony. And the ceremony itself can't fix a bad marriage. The expensive wedding, the elaborate wedding, flying all the relatives, all of that. All it does is make you feel more guilty when it's time to get a divorce because everybody was there and you spent so much money. But it's not going to improve the wedding. I mean, temporarily it may give you some motive when things are difficult to keep going. But in Kali Yuga now today, social cultures, divorce is kind of like normal. There's this joke. So the wedding is over, and the aunt says, oh, she'll make a good first wife for him. Or, the daughters, are you going to give your wedding gown to your daughter? No, I'm going to save it for my next wedding, like that. This one devotee had been married several times, and he was invited to a wedding. And this devotee is really funny. He says, I won't go to this one, but I'll go to this next one. So, that's become the atmosphere. So the ceremony doesn't seem to really be helping and causing people to take it seriously. So when I read this, I thought, well, this is good. It's a good analogy. It's the same with initiation. If you're committed, you're committed, ceremony or no ceremony. And if you're not committed, ceremony or no ceremony. So, and so here it said, the real thing is siksha. Siksha means instruction. So the real thing is not ceremony. The real thing is instruction. And what is meant by this is not the real thing is instruction, because you could avoid all the instruction. The real thing is following the instruction, of course, right? Not the real thing is instruction. No, it's not. It's following the instruction. That's the real thing, because anybody can have instructions they don't follow. So, and the reason it is said that is because by following the instructions, we become purified, and by following the instructions, we go back to Godhead. So not by the initiation alone will one go back to Godhead, but the initiation is meant to be a commitment to the instruction. Like, I'm committing to chant 16 rounds without offense and follow principles. And I'm committing to to other things. I mean, it's meant to be that way, a commitment to other things, ideally, right? So I think that's important. And the problem that we have, it's a cultural problem. Oftentimes, culture develops on its own without direction. You can create a culture, but if you don't create a culture, then culture creates itself. And so nowadays, I don't know if you're aware of this, but nowadays in ISKCON, there are things that go on that many devotees are complaining about. Why this? Why that? And, why is so much importance given to Diksha? Why is so much importance given to Diksha gurus? Why not Siksha? Why not Siksha gurus? And you go to the philosophy and you see the importance of Siksha and so forth. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur's relationship with Jagannath Das Babaji was not Diksha, it was Siksha. And there's so many examples you've probably heard. But the culture in ISKCON is different because someone's going to come up to you after a certain point of time and ask you the question, when are you going to get initiated? And if you go to India, like Tali, if you go to India, you're going to be asked the question, when? Because Tali is in her 30s, right? When are you going to get married? They'll ask you, first thing is they'll ask you, are you married? And you'll say no. And then after they faint and get up, they'll ask you, when are you going to get married? Because you're like 30 and you're not married. You should have been married when you're 13. Right? And so these are two questions you get asked, and women feel like, why are you asking me that? I don't want to be painted into a corner. I'm not ready, and I'm not ready for kids and commitment, and I haven't found the right man. And, of course, in Indian culture, they'll find you the right man, so it's like, it's easier. And nowadays, women say, how will I find the right man? I don't know where to find. And they say, Mahatma Prabhu, how do I find the right man? And I say, I don't know if the right man exists anymore. That's another problem. How do you find someone that doesn't exist? We're going to have to search for them. I'm not sure where they are anymore. I have to create a college to produce men that could actually do the job. But assuming there are men, the family would find it for you. So you get asked this question, why aren't you married? And so in ISKCON, we get asked the question, well, why aren't you initiated? Or when are you going to initiate? When are you going to initiate it? And it's, I'm not sure. And then the next question is like, why? Which means you have to reveal your whole life to them, like why you're not ready, which means you could be an alcoholic, a drug addict, a sex monger. You could, like you want to tell them everything on the spot, why you're not getting initiated. I have no faith in anybody but Prabhupada. You want to get in that conversation? Probably not. So you just don't say anything, right? Because it's just awkward. And it implies that if you're not initiated, well, there's a hell for you. Did you know? Did you read in the 5th canto, there's a hell for people who aren't initiated? Did you read about that? It's not there in the 5th canto, but it's like people almost think like it, isn't it? Like I know it's not in the 5th canto, but there must be a hell for uninitiated, because if you're not initiated, you can't go back to Godhead. And what's even more interesting is that initiation in the traditional sense is not Harinam initiation, it's second initiation, which Prabhupada said is not important because you have the holy name. So, my dear ladies and gentlemen, if you're not initiated, but you're chanting 16 rounds, following 4 principles, and you are connected to Prabhupada and or a guru, you're doing pretty good. There's not a hell for you. And there's every chance you could go back to Godhead, for which you say, well, then if that's the case, why would I be stupid enough to take vows in public that I could break? Because you want to follow those vows. That's why you take them, because you want to commit and you want to deepen your connection to Prabhupada and your guru. That's why. But until you're ready, it's not a problem, because you have the instructions, you have the Mahamantra. You have guidance from so many seniors. I mean, there's so much we already have. But my point is, and this is a point you're going to see, you're already seeing, and you will see your entire life. ISKCON has a culture, and the culture is not always designed. The culture often just exists as it is, and it may not be congruent with our philosophy. Have you noticed that? You can, if any of you want to do a PhD in sociology, you can do a PhD on this topic. I've given at least 10 PhD topics in the last few years in my classes. I may have to, I don't know, maybe I have to come back in my next life to do PhDs and all these every time I say it. But I think this would be extremely relevant and beneficial to our movement. Some of you who are professional students can just do PhDs all your life, and the university will support you. So you could do a PhD on this. How culture may evolve, which doesn't align with the teachings of a religion, but it becomes kind of a culture of assumption, interpretation, or a culture of assumption and interpretation is a starting point. And you could analyze how culture develops and why it would develop in distinct ways that are not supported exactly by our philosophy, which of course is a problem, isn't it? And we want to do everything in our power to ensure that we live the culture of our teachings, and we don't have influence in all the temples in ISKCON, but wherever we do have influence, we want to try to consciously influence the culture to represent the teachings. Otherwise, we run into the problem where we're teaching something that we don't demonstrate, and it's just very confusing for people. And it's difficult for people to believe in what you teach if they don't see it practiced in the culture, right? It's just like, your parents say don't smoke and they smoke. It's like, it's hard to get the message. Why are you telling me to not smoke and you're smoking? I don't get it. It's basically you're saying it's okay to smoke. Or you're saying, I shouldn't smoke. All right, then why are you? Then you're telling me you're my parent and you're weak and you're expecting me to be strong. It's just confusing. All right, so I thought this was a good analogy. The point being, Siksha is what's most important because it's the Siksha, it's the guidance that takes us back to Godhead. Now, there's another thing that comes up in Prabhupada's books, which you may have read, which is concerning that if your guru is not a Mahabhagwat, then his guidance is insufficient. Have you read that? Now it's time to reject your guru if you think he's not a Mahabhagwat. It's in the Nectar of Instruction. You can't advance very much under the guidance of a Kanishta or Madhyam guru. Of course, you may say, well, my guru is Uttama. Someone will say, no, he's not. Depends on the, how you look at it. There are different definitions. But let's say for the sake of argument, most ISKCON gurus are not Mahabhagwats, not yet, or on their way, or, maybe never. They're just Madhyams. Some people will say, Madhyams, are you kidding me? They're not even on the high end of Kanishta. And it depends how you look at it, right? But we'll just go with Madhyam. So I was talking to a devotee the other day and I was saying, okay, so here's the argument, your guru's not qualified, so you can't go back to Godhead. So that would mean you come to ISKCON, you have Prabhupada, of course, who's qualified, so you shouldn't get initiated, because once you get initiated by a guru who's not a Mahabhagwat, now, because he's not qualified, you're not going to go back to Godhead. So your initiation is actually making it worse. Does that make sense to you? But that's inadvertently, that's the argument. I find it a very interesting argument. Like everything's good. I've got Prabhupada's books. I've got Prabhupada's disciples to guide me. Everything is good until I get initiated by a Madhyam. And now I'm going to be contaminated by his Madhyamadikari. And he can't know everything because he's not a Mahabhagwat. So now I'm in trouble. But before initiation, everything was good. So the idea is you have Prabhupada, and hopefully after you find a guru, you have more Prabhupada. that guru is helping you understand Prabhupada. And if that guru didn't understand Prabhupada, how is that guru like still around and spreading Krishna consciousness and advancing? You know, it's like, I was trying to, we're going to do, on the 21st, I think it is. The class is going to be about common sense. Have you heard about common sense? Yeah. Well, what I just said was common sense. So my hope is that during this class, you'll realize how much uncommon sense exists sometimes in those trying to understand philosophy. It's just like it goes off into some place where when you try to understand it from a common sense point of view, it makes no sense anymore. And that was an example of one thing that makes no sense. You get guidance from a guru and now you're doomed because he's madhyam. Whereas before that, you were fine. Okay. All right. So this is the person Prabhupada trained for 50 years, and now you're doomed. You're way better off before just trying to figure it out yourself. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me think about that. I mean, obviously, in some cases, it could be true, but that's if he's not qualified. Hare Krishna. Okay, so that's Siksha versus Diksha. Don't be overly... Well, the other thing is, if you're not married, one illusion you'll have about marriage is once you get married, everything's going to be, all your problems are going to go away. Well, some will go away, but you'll get some new ones that you don't have. And a lot of those problems will not go away because they're inside you and they're just, you got to work on them to go away. You know, this illusion, well, when I give a partner and everything and we love one another, it's just like going to solve all the problems. Well, statistically speaking, you are 101% wrong. Now, you could be the exception to the other 8 billion people or 800 billion quadrillion people who are married, but I doubt you are. And so this idea, you know, like life will be easier when I'm married. All my problems will be solved when I'm married. Ask someone who's married if that's true. Some things are easier. It's, you know, it's easier to go through life with, you know, struggles with somebody by your side. But if it's the wrong person, it's not easier. It's harder. I read something that said, you know, someone says, I'm lonely, I want to get married. I said, and this person said, if you're in the same house with somebody and they won't talk to you, that's way more lonely than being on your own. So it's, you know, it's not like solution. It's a solution to my loneliness. It's a solution to this or that. No, not. It could be, but not necessarily. So in the same way, we think once I get Diksha, it's like, okay, once I get Diksha, it's like, it's downhill. And then the rude awakening hits you a few months later. Oh, it's not downhill at all. This is like, I made a commitment and Krishna's testing me. Like, so don't think it's easier. It's like, whenever you make a commitment, it's like, it gets harder because now you're committed. Not like this is serious. You know? Just boyfriend and girlfriend having fun, but now we're going to commit. Oh, so commitment means like it's a whole different league when you commit, right? So, you know, I could get initiated someday. All right, you're not committed yet. Okay, it's easier. When you commit, it's harder. Then I'm not saying that it's not also easier because now you're connected, you've made your vows. It does have that side, but it's not like automatic. Like you have to do the work. And so it's an illusion. I'll get married, all my problems will go. No, they won't. Not if you don't work on them, they won't. Might seem like they go, but they're just covered by your hypnotic trance of love until you get out of the trance and you realize, oh, they're all still there. So, you know, getting initiated is some kind of high and, you know, it's like a milestone and it's intoxicating. And yes, it is important and it's empowering and you're connected with your guru and all that, but it doesn't mean that now you have no responsibility to advance and it's just going to happen. Don't ever think like that. It's never like that. no matter what. Oh, I'll take sannyas. It'll even be easier. Yeah, right. Well, look at the statistics. It doesn't seem to be easier, right? So whenever you think I'll do this and it'll be easier, you're an illusion, generally. Well, go to Vrindavan, it'll be easier. Yeah. But does that mean you can be in Maya in Vrindavan? No. It means the environment is conducive. But it always comes down to if I have material attachments, I have to do something about it, right? I'm the one who has to work on it. If I have personal problems, I'm the one who has to work on it. It's not like I just go into a situation and bing, they all just exploded. It was like that with Prabhupada. We'd be with him and it's just like, wow, all Maya was exploded. And then he'd go away. And guess what? What happened? It seems like that explosion, everything that was exploded kind of came back together. And, it seemed like it was exploded in that great inspiration. And a lot of it certainly was, but not everything. We still had to do the work. And if we didn't do the work, there was nothing Prabhupada could do for us because, he could do a lot, and a lot of what he did was through his instructions, but we had to take those instructions. So it's important that the responsibility is always on us. Don't ever think, no, Guru Dev giving you mercy. Okay, he gives you mercy. How do you get the mercy of Guru? Following his instruction. And even if he just decides, okay, mercy, you don't have to follow anything, I give you mercy, but you still have to do something with it. Okay, here's how. Gurudev, help me become rich. Okay, here's $1,000, start a business. No, can't you give me 10 million and I'll just retire? No, here's 1,000, start a business. You have to do it. It's never going to be you do nothing. You retire. Gurudev, can't you chant my rounds for me? Can you give me mercy? So I'll just chant. I don't, it's like I'll be overcome by the desire to chant. He can give some mercy like that, but you still have to do the work ultimately. That's just how it is. So, Hare Krishna. We'll go back to reading. A 9-point summary of Madhvacharya's philosophy. Are you ready? Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, is the absolute truth, and nothing is higher than him. He is known by the study of the Vedas, Sarvasya Chaham. That's Bhagavad Gita 15:15. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. The material world is real, but temporary. So we say it's unreal. We say it's illusory in the sense that it's not permanent, but it's real in the sense that it does exist. The jivas are different from the Lord. So sometimes you see Madhvacharya, it's pictures of him like this. Hippies used to do that, which was, I believe, a peace sign. Do people do that anymore? Or is this like from the hippie days? They do that anymore? Or that's 60s only? You want to be a hippie, do this. Okay, well, you can be a hippie. So that's the peace sign. Peace, brother. But Madhvacharya, you'll see pictures like this. So it's two, Krishna and living entity, not one, two. That's what he meant. The jivas are by nature servants of Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. In both the conditioned and liberated states, the jivas are situated in higher and lower statuses and always remain individuals in their identity. So he's obviously opposing Mayavad philosophy. Liberation does not mean an impersonal merging, but the attainment of serving Lord Vishnu's lotus feet. Pure devotional service rendered to Guru and Vishnu automatically grants liberation, release from material bondage. Direct perception, logic, and Vedic authority are three sources of actual knowledge. Mahaprabhu, what he did, you may know, Mahaprabhu took a little bit from the four great sampradayas, the great teachers, and then he created his philosophy, which is called Achintya, which means inconceivable, Veda, Aveda Tattva, which means one and different. So you have one and different. We are one with Krishna in quality, but not one in quantity. So we're different, but qualitatively one. So it was like the resolution of the different philosophies of the different sampradayas. And so Madhva is saying we're different, and Mahaprabhu is saying we're the same also. Same and different. Achintya, Veda, Tattva means truth, Achintya. Inconceivably, Veda, Advaita, one and different. You are the same as God, but you are not God. In case you haven't noticed, you're not God, right? I mean, if you were God, life would be different, wouldn't it? Of course, if you were God, you'd have a lot of responsibility. I mean, it would be your responsibility to make sure the sun rises every day. I don't know. Sounds like a big responsibility, but if you're God, then not a problem. But if you're not God, definitely would be difficult, don't you think? You want to try out being God for a while? See if you can keep the universe going and reciprocating with all living entities and, like that. I don't know. And then we have this idea that we see in Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu is looking at the love of Radha and he's thinking, this is like, I don't even know what that love is, because like the way she loves me it's unknown to me. So then it glorifies the devotee's position. So you want to be God, but then you look at Radha and think, from Mahaprabhu's perspective, oh, that's even better than being God. The love because if you're God, then, if you're not God, you can love God and you can have love of God. But if you're God, you can't. So it's better not to be God, because then you can have love for God. Whereas if you're God, you can't have love for God because you are God. So the love the devotees have for Krishna is greater than the love he has for them. And that's why he came as Mahaprabhu, because if he didn't have that love, he wanted to know what it's all about. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? So you don't have to be God. That would be like a step down. So or sometimes the example is given when someone wants to become God. And then we say, well, you have two choices. You could become sugar or you could taste sugar. So what do you think's better, becoming sugar or tasting it? I go, okay, tasting it sounds better than becoming it. The connotation is if I become sugar, I can't taste it. So if I become God, then I can't taste rasa, relationship with God, because I am that God. You want to be God, and he doesn't even want to be God. So you're kind of mixed up here. You're trying to be God, and even God's coming to try to be his devotee. Like, check that out. Interesting, isn't it? You're trying to become God, and God's trying to become a devotee of himself, because that's a higher position. So, we're already doing good. You don't have to like change your position, try to become God. And if you try to become God, all you're doing is merging in Brahman. You're not becoming God, you're becoming one with his light. That's the best you can do. And you lose your individual identity to become one with that Brahman effulgence. And to stay in that Brahman effulgence, you can't identify yourself as a person, because persons have desire. And so to stay in that Brahman, you have to be desireless. So imagine being desireless. Like, just try it. Try it for 3 seconds, see if you can do it. And then you say, okay, I'm going to desire to be Oh, you had a desire that I'm going to desire to be desireless. No, you blew it. It doesn't work. Just be desireless, have no desire. You can't even have the desire to merge in Brahman. Like, imagine that. Okay, so now I've got to the state of desirelessness. And I'm merged in Brahman. I have to stay in that state of desirelessness. And if I have any desire, like, this is boring, get me out of here, then I've identified as an individual, because as soon as you identify with the desire, that means identity. Like, I am a person because I have a desire. And so then you fall down from that position. So it's kind of like a struggle to stay in that position. I don't know why anybody would want to be in it, but that's another topic. But if you're trying to maintain desirelessness, at some point, you're not going to be able to do it. I think most of us couldn't do it for a nanosecond. But if you practice and come to the state of Brahman realization and feeling the bliss of Brahman, still Prabhupada said, it gets lonely after a while. Then you want to do something because you imagine not doing anything for eternity. Might get kind of boring and you're merged. You have no identity. So there's no relationship. So now what's interesting about this philosophy is, I find it interesting because I'm interested in psychology. Prabhupada talks about this philosophy from a psychological perspective. Like, why would you want to merge in Brahman? Well, after lots of horrible relationships with people, maybe you don't want relationships, or maybe you think if I have a relationship with God, it's going to be as bad as a relationship I had with my wife or husband. Forget it. I just want to become a non-entity and merge and have no relationship, because relationships are full of suffering. Every time I get in a close relationship, I suffer, right? If you have a very close relationship and you deeply care about the person and that person becomes upset with you, you suffer 100 times more than if some person on the street becomes upset with you, right? So relationships are painful. And the more you love, the more you suffer, isn't it? So I'm not going to love anybody. I'm not going to have close relationship with anybody. I will just merge. So Prabhupada's saying that a lot of times the spiritualist desire to become one with God is a reaction to the pain of relationships in this world. And or the thinking that the spiritual is the opposite of material. So if in material world there are relationships, then in spiritual life, there's no relationship. There's just a oneness, a merging with the universal consciousness. A lot of people talk about it. It's really undefined, a merging with the universal energy, conscious, whatever that is. We defined it as Brahman. It's Brahman effulgence, living entities merged together in this Krishna's effulgence. And there's a problem with that, which we need to understand. I think you all understand it, but we all need to understand it even more than we understand it now. What's the problem with that? The problem with that is we are all servants of Krishna. We are all part of Krishna. You know that. We have a loving relationship with Krishna. You know that. And when you try to merge in Brahman, you annihilate all of that. That's basically, the merging in Brahman is basically annihilation of your relationship with Krishna, because you're no longer a person. So that's why, if you ever see Prabhupada upset when someone's speaking in personal philosophy, it's because they're annihilating their relationship with Krishna, and they're also annihilating Krishna as a person. So, and Prabhupada has come to get us all back into our relationship with Krishna, right? And so what could be worse than annihilating? It's like, Scarlett, you have children and they say, I don't have a mother. It's like, how does that feel? Like, what do you mean you don't have a mother? I'm your mother. No, I don't have a mother. I don't have a father. There's no God. I have no separate existence. My mother and I are one. We have no individual identity. So all these things are basically, essentially, foundationally antithetical to the very principles of spiritual reality. And it's just kind of like a polite form of atheism, which uses the word God, but for all intents and purposes, there isn't a God. There's just an energy, an impersonal energy, which you become, which in a sense is worse than being an atheist. Because an atheist, you don't become God, you just deny him. So trying to be God is worse than denying God. Did you know that? I believe in God. I believe I'm God. You should become an atheist. That would be better for you. Because atheism is not necessarily offensive. It's just, well, I don't believe in God. And then you have, you don't talk about it. But to be God is offensive. To try to say I am God is offensive. Does that make sense to you? Or something you can think about if it doesn't? So, if you had a choice to, of course, someone might say, well, if you try to become God, at least you believe in some kind of God. But it's quite offensive, actually, to say that I'm God. So, does anyone have any questions about all of this? Krishnadas Kaviraj, your parents did. Durga Puja. Samira says, I find it valuable to relish it so much to read books about Prabhupada from his disciples, to read about their dedication and faith. Yeah, it's very important. To really understand Prabhupada, I think you need to hear from individuals. And in Americanism, hullabaloo. Can we get an exact definition of hullabaloo? Can somebody look it up? Then you'll learn something today when you come to America. If you say hullabaloo, people will think you're like from the 50s or something, or from some little town with 3 people in it. Radha Vinod wants to know if that's a bindi. Radha Vinod, I've joined a new sampradaya. It's called the Dermatologist Sampradaya. And when I lived in South Africa and Mauritius, the sun down there is and Australia, the sun is like, I don't know, 5 times more intense than in other places. And I spent a lot of time in the sun. And now at my age, I'm paying the price. So they have to, when they test to see if it's a potential skin cancer, they have to scrape a little bit off. And then they test it. And then if they say, oh, it's a potential skin cancer, they have to cut it very, very deeply so it doesn't go in, because it could actually go inside. And it's one of the deadly forms of cancer is from your skin going inside. And if you neglect it for many years, then it goes very deep, and they have to cut very deep. Whereas if you keep on top of it, they don't have to cut so deep. But if they say it's a potential skin cancer, I'll go back and they'll cut it out. And they cut it out maybe that deep. So I kind of, I'll have an eternal bindi of some sort. I already had one cut here, and the skin, when you cut it, it doesn't ever heals properly. So putting on tilak is like a real challenge. It's already a challenge now because they cut up here. And so my forehead it's not even anymore. So it's not easy to put on tilak anymore. So that's where we're at with don't worry, I haven't joined a different sampradaya, although it looks like our bindis are really for women, although men wear them sometimes in ceremonies, because the red powder is used in a ceremony. So sometimes you'll get it on your forehead, but bindis are traditionally used by women who are married. Prabhupada said that Vedic culture is interesting because, at least traditionally, the way women dressed would tell you if they're married or not, or interestingly, if they're prostitutes, in case you're interested in prostitutes. Hopefully you're not, but by the way they dressed. And so one of the ways you would know if she's married or not is the bindi. That means she's married. So, just forget her. She's off. She's out of touch. She's already married. Now, if you go to Mayapur, you will see something very interesting, which is confusing the first time you're there, because you will see women in saris. And you'll see women in saris and you'll go, Hari Bol, and they'll just look at you like that. And you think, this is Mayapur. I said Hari Bol. And later you'll find out if they don't have a bindi or tilak, they're Muslims. but it's the same. They grew up in the same culture, and then their families, which were one time Hindus, were converted to be Muslims, but the whole Hindu culture remained, except their religion changed. So they still wear saris, they cover their heads. And the only way you can tell if they're Hindus is the tilak or bindi or something on their forehead. So if you say Hari Bol to them, they're very happy to see you and say Hari Bol, and they'll have big smiles and sometimes maybe even invite you in their home. But if you get nothing from them, it's because they're Muslim. Right? Did you know that? No. If you didn't, now you know. Okay. Does Krishna feel pain because living entities always keep him away and not consider his love? Yeah, but not the way we would feel pain. Not like we would feel like false ego pain. Krishna feels pain because we're his children. And then, to understand Krishna's feeling pain, how do you relate it? Like God feels pain. What's that pain? It's the pain of compassion. He feels the pain of our pain. It's not like he can't enjoy Ras Leela because Abhinav is still like not in Ras Leela, but he feels your pain in you trying to enjoy, and everything you do to try to enjoy just causes you more suffering. So he feels that pain. Right? So the pain that you feel, he also feels. He's in your heart. He knows what you're going through. Right? And so his pain is that you're going through the pain, and he feels the pain of our ignorance. And we keep doing things that cause us pain. And he's telling us what to do that wouldn't cause us pain. So that is painful for him, just as it's painful for a parent if their children are in pain. But the parent can be a multimillionaire living in a beautiful mansion, have all the comforts of life, have millions of friends, all the enjoyment in the world, but they'll feel the pain of their children also. So it's like, well, you could say he feels the pain of love for you. Maybe someone might argue it's not really pain, it's love. Say, okay, it's love. Premanishta, you look like it's snowing up there or something. Don't you have a heater in your house? Or it's too expensive to put it on? She just moved to one of the coldest places in the universe. It's on the same, if you go from where she lives and you go west, you'll end up in Moscow, right? Or you go east. Either way, you'll end up in Moscow eventually. It's on that same level. So I went there in 1971 and it was covered with snow about 6 months a year. So, but as a dutiful wife, she's going where her husband is going because marriage means sacrifice, right? If you don't want to make sacrifice, if you don't want to make compromise, I have some advice for you. Don't get married. You'll learn more about that in a few weeks. And I have to give a disclaimer. If you're already married and you come to this class, you could go into a state of depression because you may realize, oh my God, I married the wrong person. He's got all the signs. So if you're married and everything's fine, definitely don't come to this class because it could disrupt you. But if you're in a relationship and you're not married, yeah, definitely you should come because you can get out of it. Right? Better get out of it before you're married than after. It's a lot easier. Well, if you're a woman, you think, I'll get married and get out of it, then I'll be rich. So, but that's not the reason to get married. Create suffering for somebody. Okay. We have a definition of hullabaloo. This is your English lesson for today. A loud noise made by people who are angry or annoyed. A lot of angry comments made in public about someone or something. Make a hullabaloo. There's a crowd of angry demonstrators making a real hullabaloo outside the House of Parliament. Synonyms: anarchy, ballyhoo, old-fashioned slang. I also understand it as you're making a big thing about something that's not big. So we say he's making a big hullabaloo about it. would mean it's not a big thing. You hear what so-and-so said in class, and all you can do all day is talk about it. You're making a bigger thing than it actually is. Mathura is saying, in any relationship, what is the barometer for how much to tolerate or to bring up issues or things they're doing that are disturbing? Well, the purpose of this class is to help you, this course coming up, is to help you not get into a situation where you didn't do due diligence before the relationship, before you get married, and enter and go further with it. So we need to be tolerant, but you also need to know what is for you. What do you need, and what are you willing to tolerate and not willing to tolerate? That's called boundaries. So when you have boundaries, then your boundaries dictate what you're able to tolerate. Now, you might say, I should be able to tolerate more, and maybe you should, but maybe you can't. So you have to know what your boundaries are. So let's say I grew up and my father screamed at me all the time. And so I'm pretty traumatized by people screaming. I heard, I saw this, I told you this before. There was a man was talking to a woman, and he went like that to scratch his head, and the woman went back. And he said, what happened? He said, well, I was beaten by my father or my husband or somebody. So when you went like that, I thought you were going to beat me. So that's like extreme, right? It's like, wow, that's extreme. But you might say, that's what I've been through. So my boundary is, I can't be yelled at. I just can't take it. So maybe you should be able to take it, but you can't. And so that's just what it is. And the person you want to be with has to know that. And you have to test and make sure that that person is not an angry person, because if they are, it's not going to work, right? So sometimes, you have what I should tolerate and what I can tolerate, and you have to be realistic about what you can't tolerate. And you might say, I wish I could tolerate this, but I can't. And I wish I could. And if I were a better devotee, I could. But maybe due to my past experience, I can't. And I have to be realistic about it, because if I falsely think I can, I'm going to get into a situation where I see that I can't, and it's going to cause a problem, right? It's like thinking, I can digest this, but I can't. No, but I should be able to, so I eat it, and then I just vomit or get diarrhea. It's the reality, everyone else in the world can digest this but me. So does that mean I can digest it? Of course not. So you have to deal with reality in terms of what your boundaries are. Now, maybe as you grow, your boundaries will change, but you have to know what they are. And if you get married and you don't know what your boundaries are, you may run into trouble, because you'll let people cross your boundaries and they'll wear you out, and you won't be able to deal with that at a certain point. And you'll collapse, or they'll collapse. Muslims wearing saris, culture trumps religion, yeah. And Christians don't really have much culture, do they? They're pretty much westernized. Well, they maybe have a little bit. But it's pretty, it's pretty much like if you're a Christian in America or Europe, pretty much your culture is the culture. Okay, regarding guru, Kamaniya says, I heard many years ago that actually when one's guru is who one's guru is a private matter, and it is against our etiquette to ask someone who their guru is. Is this right? Yeah, pretty much. But we may have to know who your guru is, because sometimes we may have to know, but Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, I believe in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, says there's certain things you should keep private, like how many rounds you chant a day, and keep your beads covered, like in a bag. Or Gaudiya Math, you'll see they chant like this. They keep their beads covered. They chant like that. Keep your guru secret, like that. But it's also like traditional culture. A woman won't call her husband by her name. She'll call him Pati, or he'll call her Devi. That's a kind of etiquette. It's kind of awkward for us in the West, but that's the etiquette. So we say my Guru Maharaj. That's an etiquette. But if someone asks you, then it's also awkward not to tell them. When we receive this question and don't feel to answer, what would be the best reply without making a big deal? Feel how sometimes devotees ask this question because they're trying to somehow categorize and judge. Yeah. Some devotees feel it's like awkward because we're trying to create a unified movement around Prabhupada. When someone introduces themselves, my name is so-and-so, I'm a disciple of so-and-so. Why did you have to say that? We're all followers of Prabhupada. I would say if there's relevance to that, like my name is Krishnadasi and there are 4,000 Krishnadasis in ISKCON, or well, let's say there's 100. Well, whose Krishnadasi are you? I'm Gopal Krishna Maharaj's Krishnadasi. Yeah, that might make sense. Just like we need to know if there's relevance to knowing who my guru is, or for you, if there's relevance for you to know. That's another thing. But some devotees feel like it just we're creating divisions and distinctions. Or like, yeah, or as you said, maybe someone's trying to brag because my guru has 4 million disciples and I'm one of them, and everybody knows he's like the next incarnation. And, he's really the Acharya of ISKCON, and I'm his disciple. Indeed, I was one of the first disciples of him, which makes it even more prestigious, right? So it can sound like you're bragging. And it's nice to be proud that you're his disciple and he's like really special. But it's not nice to be proud. It's not nice to show that pride off in a way that could just not be appropriate. So I think it's hard not to answer Kamini when someone asks that. Who's your girl? I'm not going to tell you because Sanatana Goswami said shouldn't be revealed. Like, do you want to do that? I mean, you could be a little snotty and say, be like a New Yorker. What's it to you? Kamania, who's your girl? What's it to you? Of course, you wouldn't do that. Probably easier just to tell them. Don't you think? Why are you asking? Why do you need to know? I don't think it's a good idea to ask. We don't want to do that either. And I don't think your Guru Maharaj would appreciate it. So we have a definition. This is, why do you ask? Which sometimes stumps them. Then I change the subject or talk about Prabhupada. Yeah. It probably makes them feel bad also, like they just did something wrong. You don't need to ask Prabhu. It's just dividing our movement up. I mean, how are they going to feel? If you say, Kamini, if you really don't want to say, I don't think it really matters whose disciple any of us are. We're all disciples of Prabhupada, and I kind of feel awkward, So is it okay if I don't tell you? You can guess if you need to. My guru is the one who tells all the stories. You can guess who that is. Her guru is, we don't want to say who her guru is. He's just the one who tells all the stories. Okay. Well, there's a few gurus who tell us all the stories. It's like, it's kind of, it's. Or you could be polite and say, I'm just wondering, why is it important for you to know that? But it makes people feel awkward, doesn't it? But here's the definition of hullabaloo. That was my definition. Hullabaloo is a lovely term for a fuss or commotion, usually over something of little or no importance. So that's like, there's a lot of hullabaloo going on in ISKCON, don't you think? Kirti says, the senior devotee in the temple told to take initiation as soon as possible since all Guru Maharaj are leaving the world. Yeah, that's a good point. This creates a pressure. And what if we are not ready for initiation? I want to read all Prabhupada's books thoroughly and be strong. Yeah. See, the thing is, this is a very good point. Let's say I'm attached to so-and-so Maharaj, and so Maharaj leaves his body before I could take initiation. Does that mean my connection to so-and-so Maharaj is finished? No. Like, so I may have to take initiation as a formality from someone else, but my connection is to that person. He's my most important guru. And the answer to the question is, who's your most important guru? Now get ready for this answer. It's very profound. You may want to write this down. Who is my most important guru? The answer is the guru that is most important to you. Now I know that was profound. That's the point of my class on common sense, but sometimes we don't use it because we go off into some philosophy, guru tattva, and the guru is most important to you is the guru who's helping you the most, obviously, right? How could it be anyone else? The guru is helping you the most. You may have many gurus that help you the most. They all help you the most. Or you may have one who helps you more than others who's not your Diksha guru. It's possible. And it's not an offense to your Diksha guru. And maybe like we're saying here, that's the person you couldn't take Diksha from because you weren't ready by the time they left their body. But you're eternally connected. There are a few devotees who met Prabhupada who never got initiated, and now they have a hard time getting initiated because they say, I can't take initiation from anyone other than Prabhupada. And I've had people approach me like that, and I just said, I will give you initiation, but you should always feel Prabhupada is your guru. And that's the only way I would initiate you. That just to help you solidify that principle that we should take initiation, but it shouldn't in any way interfere with your connection to Prabhupada. Sydney says, so when we share about you on Facebook etiquette, maybe not say my Gurudev, just say who you are. No. It depends on the context. If you have to mention me for some reason. Otherwise, you say my Guru Maharaj. I thought, Radhavinod said, I thought Prabhupada is the most important guru. Well, it depends. I mean, in theory, yeah, we all depend on him, but not that everyone will feel that way. And some devotees say, you can't tell people Prabhupada's your most important guru because at some point in your life, the person, your Siksha guru, your Diksha guru is the one who's explaining everything to you about Prabhupada that you would never understand. So then they become the most important because they're the one that's helping you connect with Prabhupada, who's your most important. So, you know what I'm saying? So there's a bit of subjectivity to it. Does that make sense? I agree that Prabhupada's our most important guru, and I also agree that you can't legislate relationships, right? And I think the problem with Guru Tattva is sometimes in discussions about Guru Tattva, people want to legislate relationships, and you can't. I can't tell you who is your most important guru, who you should be attached to, what emotional experiences you should have, how you should feel about somebody. But we can only explain philosophically what is guru, what is Siksha guru, like that, and then you can't legislate how that evolves. And in different stages of bhakti, your attachment to your guru, your attachment to Prabhupada will evolve, mature, and you can go in different ways. That makes sense? Just like when you're a young kid, your attachment to your parent, it's a more dependent relationship. It can become a little different when you're older. But yeah, Kirti, I wouldn't force initiation. I think you have to do it when you're ready. Okay, it's time to chant. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I guess we can turn this class off and turn on japa.
Hare Krishna.